We've been having over the course of these days these incredible readings from the Gospel of St. John. As we know, of course, there are 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The first 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are called synoptic Gospels, and it's a Greek word that simply means you can view them all through one eye. They have so many similar things that they talk about. John's Gospel, however, while it talks about events that are in the other 3 Gospels, it is a unique Gospel. And that's why the image for St. John, of course, is the eagle, because the eagle soars into the skies mysteriously, beautifully. And John's Gospel is so deep, so rich, so full of symbolism. There is layer upon layer of deep meanings which many of the saints and the fathers of the church and so forth have tried to really gain new insights into. And the beautiful gospel that we have today, what we're really seeing throughout the course of these days, and we see it with a certain intensity today, is there's a growth in the intensity of Christ claiming to be God. It's getting deeper and deeper, more intense each day we read his gospel. He's trying to lead the people, particularly the scribes and the Pharisees, the doctors of the law, those who knew the scriptures so well and who should have known who he was, who he is, and yet they didn't see the truth before their own eyes. It's a real warning for all of us, but especially for those of us who have had the opportunity through God's grace to study the Word of God deeply, to have a relationship with him in prayer. Do we really know who he is? And if we know who he is he real for us? I always remember Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI talking about this, and also Pope Francis, when he said to us, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically what he said to us was, never forget that God is not a philosophical supposition. God is not a theological concept. These are good things. God is a person, a real person. So we're not falling in love with an idea. We don't fall in love. Who falls in love with ideas? We fall in love with people. And Jesus is a person, and he wants us to fall in love with him, to have a real relationship with him of intimacy. And that's why the word know, used often in today's gospel, I know him, but you don't know him. The word for know, of course, the gospels are written in Greek, but the word for know comes from the original Hebrew, which means not to know an idea about someone. To know someone is like saying Adam knew Eve, meaning he was intimate with her. Knowing Jesus is spending time with him, talking with him. It's like a good friend. We've all got friends. And the friends I have, I take the time to telephone them, I meet them. When I get a holiday, I spend time with them. You spend time with the people you love, and that's how they know you love them, that's how you know they love you, and that's how you build up your relationship. It's very human. It's the same with Jesus. In order to come to know him, in order to encounter his merciful look, we have to spend time with him. And it's beautiful to spend time with Jesus. Jesus, of course, also in the gospel is trying to get the scribes and the Pharisees and the people to see that they have the most incredible gift of mercy before them, because God, the second person of the Trinity, has assumed a human nature, Jesus, and has come down to give us his love and his mercy. Pope Francis has said many times that the present era that we're all living in, he says we're living in a time of mercy. When he was meeting with a group of parishioners in Rome on March the 6th, 2014, Pope Francis had no doubt about how to define the present era in which we're living. He said this: we're living in a time in which God shows us a greater love. A greater love. Now, certainly when we read the scriptures, when we read the Word of God, every page of the Bible really speaks to us about the extraordinary love of God for us. It's a love story, the greatest love story ever told. But where it certainly shines with a greater intensity is precisely on the cross of the Son of God. Pope Francis, reflecting upon this, says these words to us. He says, Jesus takes upon himself all the evil, the sin of the world, including the sin of each one of us, and he cleanses it. He cleanses it with his blood, with the mercy and the love of God. He says, let's look around us. How many wounds are inflicted upon humanity by evil, by wars, violence, economic conflicts that always strike the weakest through the greed for money, for power, corruption, divisions, crimes against human life and against creation. And as each one of us knows so well and is aware of, caused by our own personal sins, by our failures in love and respect towards God, towards our neighbor, and towards the whole of creation. Jesus on the cross feels the whole weight of this evil, and with the force of God's love, he conquers it all. He defeats it through his resurrection. And so the entire church is very encouraged by the mercy of the Lord to respond. It calls forth from us a real response to his appeal for mercy. And at the same time, we're called to respond to all the men and women of our time with mercy and with forgiveness, kindness, gestures of love, gestures of love. The call to come back to God, which is especially, of course, keenly felt in Lent. The call to return, to convert again. It's not just for Lent, it's for every time. It's everlasting, it's eternal. Because it's an impulse built within our nature to always go out of ourselves. To go out of ourselves and to carry out the church's mission of evangelization. Pope Francis speaks about this beautifully and simply in his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium. And he uses a really lovely image. He calls us, he says, to be a people who are an amphora. That's a Greek word. And what it means is a vessel holding water. Because Pope Francis says, we are called to quench the thirst of those who live in the spiritual desert of our own time. He says this, at times the amphora does become a heavy cross. But remember, it was from the cross precisely, from his pierced side, that our blessed Lord gave himself to us as a source of living water. So let's end there with that lovely, lovely image of the amphora. Let's ask the Lord to help us to be a carrier of water, to quench the thirst of all whom we come into contact with, in our families, with our friends, with our loved ones, with anyone whom we may meet. Let's seek to quench their thirst and to really evangelize through our actions, through our words, through the kindness of our gestures, and to bring always the Lord's mercy to them. Amen.